The 1990s, a time when Jennifer Aniston's hair and Cartoon Network were cornerstones of American culture. However, the place to be in the 90s was in the software business, and WinAmp was at the center of it all. I've mentioned WinAmp in some of my previous videos before, but I've never actually done any deeper research about it, and it's kind of an obvious choice for a video now that I think about it. I mean, it's one of the most beloved programs to come out of the early internet. Its parallel development to the MP3 format becoming popular ushered in a new era of MP3 file sharing that would change the music landscape in the coming decades. WinAmp was created as an audio player for Windows in 1997 by none other than Justin Frankel and Dmitry Buldrev. If you've been watching my videos for a while now, you'll probably recognize the name Justin Frankel because he was the mastermind behind the wildly popular DAW called Reaper. Justin started his company Nullsoft in the same year, and WinAmp was the first official product that Nullsoft released. Totally unrelated, but the name Nullsoft was created as a parody of Microsoft, adding to their not-so-serious attitude with their llama logo for their company. Anyways, WinAmp stands side by side with hundreds of different programs that were created in the 1990s that went on to be some of the biggest names in software. Unlike the real audio player we went over last week, WinAmp was pretty much universally praised for not only being free, but being one of the best of its kind in terms of speed and features. I would argue that WinAmp was a part of the cultural zeitgeist online during this time for a variety of reasons. So let's go back to the 90s and explore how this program got made and why it ended up being cemented into internet history.
We shipped a default MP3 with WinAmp for a while that was WinAmp. It really whips the llama's ass.
Justin Frankel, born in 1978, is a computer programmer with a huge amount of accomplishments like founding Nullsoft and Kakos, creating a P2P network called Nutella, and most importantly for this video, created WinAmp in 1997. Both he and Dmitry saw the potential and growth of the relatively new MP3 file format and created a crude interface on Windows and got to work on WinAmp. They had used something called Advanced Multimedia Products made by a Croatian programmer, which is widely considered to be the first software decoder to be able to play MP3 files. They adapted this decoder to work on Windows devices, and thus WinAmp was born. It was actually free because the AMP decoder they used was for non-commercial use, but Justin had added a donation button to his website to help support him and ended up making tens of thousands of dollars for his efforts. The original program looked pretty bare bones, which amounted to what was essentially a file menu with a stop, play, pause, and unpause options in the drop-down menu. The most clever thing here is how it functioned, being one of the earlier programs to use drag and drop, which is one of the best quality of life features in many modern day programs. You could either use the command line to play something or simply drag a file onto its icon and it would start playing. So outside the fact that it was one of the first and only software-based MP3 players, WinAmp's popularity came from the fact that it was free, easy to use, and had a no bullshit design. In mid-1997, we'd begin to see the actual interface expand beyond just a menu. It was still very simple, but it had everything you needed to play your music without any unnecessary friction, unlike many other clunky programs from the time period. Probably the most important thing though was the addition of dragging multiple files at once, which were queued, or you could press shuffle to play them randomly. This version of WinAmp is probably sparking memories for a lot of people, and it's this iteration with the green on gray look that people remember the program for. Just looking at its features, it's almost laughable when compared to today's software, but I think that's the biggest reason for its success. It was one of the few programs that came exactly as advertised, with no bloat or fat, no advertisements, and most importantly, it just worked. One of the most frustrating first world problems of the modern day is running into a program that refuses to cooperate or is riddled with bugs. But WinAmp was different. Chalk it up to Justin Frankel being really good at what he does, or the fact that the program was very simple, who really knows? Version 1 came only a couple months later in June of 1997. With its newfound popularity, Justin licensed the AMP decoder and officially founded Nullsoft 6 months later. He changed the model from freeware to shareware so we could officially make money from it, but he did not hide features behind a paywall. Rather, people would send $10 to Nullsoft because of the good reputation they had. There was one bump in the road though when one of the co-creators of the AMP decoder sent a cease and desist letter to Nullsoft for using their decoder without a license. However, by then Justin had replaced it with his own decoder called Nitrane and the case was dropped. This new version included a spectrum analyzer and the ability to scrub through different parts of a song, and this would be the precursor to the famous visualizer that would come in later, which in my opinion is one of the most recognizable things that came from WinAmp. Version 1.9, released in March of 1998, came with the support of plugins, one of which was the audio visualizer. If you were like me, you probably had spent hundreds of hours with these types of visualizations on the screen while listening to music. And lastly, the famous demo.mp3 file would come along in this version as well.
WinAmp. It really whips the llama's ass.
These were all classic features from WinAmp that people look back fondly on, but it was only the start because it was about to get a whole lot bigger. Version 2, which is probably the most recognizable version, came in September of 1998 with a whole host of upgrades and features. Firstly, the equalizer that came with it was massively improved. You could also visualize files that you had queued up in a playlist format, which became easier to use as well. However, the update that I'd personally consider to be the big cheese would come along, which was the addition of skins into WinAmp. You could create your own and publish it on winamp.com, and there were thousands of these made by people all over the world, so you could customize your media player exactly how you liked it. On top of that, there were a ton more plugins added, from simple things like an alarm clock all the way to a karaoke plugin so you could sing along to your music. In version 2.9, you could view your entire music library much like how iTunes displays all of your music. However, the biggest development yet would happen in 1999, which was AOL buying Nullsoft for $80 million worth of AOL stock. This event wouldn't change much in terms of Winamp's features because Justin was still the one working on it and would continue for a few years. By the year 2000, Winamp had over 25 million users and was by far the most popular MP3 player for Windows. In 2002, Winamp 3 would come out, and it was one of the first missteps that the company had with their product. Users found it consuming too many resources and would sometimes crash on top of not having some of the features that version 2 had. Worst of all, it had no backwards compatibility with version 2, so many people ended up simply going back a version. Nullsoft quickly realized this and started developing version 2 all the way up until 2003, which is what most people ended up using. In December of 2003, WinAmp 5 was released and changed the default look of the program to a blue and white theme and introduced CD and DVD burning amongst some other improvements. However, the original Nullsoft team would quit in 2004 and a new team would take over. Whether or not this event heavily influenced the eventual decline of Winamp's popularity is something we can only really speculate on. But there were other factors too, such as iTunes taking up a huge market share in the media player space, along with other free software out there like Windows Media Player or VLC. I think that a changing landscape made Winamp less useful in an age where most people use their phones or streaming services to listen to music, and less people have actual digital copies of songs stored on their computers. Winamp would change hands one last time, being purchased by Radionomy and eventually converted into an online streaming service, with Winamp 6 being called the Winamp Player. Winamp undoubtedly changed the course of music software back in the 90s and is easily one of the most iconic programs to come out of the time period. If you guys have any other suggestions on things you'd like me to talk about, please let me know in the comments. Thank you guys for watching, stay safe out there, and I'll see you in the next video.